My name is Natalie Brooks, and last year my own brother dragged me into court. Not because I owed him money, not because I broke a promise, but because of 12 tiny velvet boxes, the ones that held my mother's wedding gold. Those pieces weren't just jewelry. They were the last things she touched before the cancer took her. The bracelet still smelled faintly of rose water, her favorite perfume. The rings carried the warmth of her hands. To me, they were memory. To my brother, they were money. He said I was keeping family property from him. He said I was ungrateful. He said Mom meant for him to have it, and he said it loudly enough that I ended up standing in front of a judge, clutching the only inheritance I'd ever received. But what he didn't expect, what none of them expected, was that the truth would surface, right there in that courtroom. And when it did, he couldn't even look me in the eye. Let me tell you how it started. I've lived in Seattle for almost 10 years now, in a one-bedroom apartment that overlooks a tangle of rooftops and neon signs. It isn't glamorous. The pipes groan when the heat kicks on. The windows fog in winter, and the neighbors above me sound like they rehearse a tap dance routine at midnight. But it's mine. I paid the rent every month with my own salary. I filled the bookshelves with dog-eared novels, planted basil on the fire escape, and hung my mother's framed wedding photo above the sofa. On the dresser in my bedroom sat a small oak jewelry box. Inside it were the velvet pouches, each holding a piece of her wedding set. Bangles, chains, earrings, and 2 thick rings. She'd worn them when she married my father, when she carried me home from the hospital, and on every holiday that mattered. When she died 3 years ago, she pressed my hand over that box and whispered, "Keep them, Nat. They're yours." Those were her last words to me. My brother Daniel wasn't there. He'd missed the hospital call because he was in Las Vegas, networking with investors. That was always Daniel's way. Fast money, fast talk, faster excuses. Growing up, he was the golden boy. My parents bragged about his charm, his potential, his next big venture. I was the quiet one, the girl with books under her arm and dark circles under her eyes from late-night study sessions. When Mom's funeral ended, Dad handed Daniel the keys to her car. To me, he handed silence, except for the jewelry. That was the one thing Mom made sure would stay with me. For 3 years, nobody mentioned it, until last September. That night, Daniel called. His voice was unusually sweet, like honey poured too thick. "Nat," he said, "let's have dinner." "Just us. Haven't seen you in forever." I hesitated. Daniel didn't invite people to dinner unless he wanted something. But a small part of me, the sister part, wanted to believe maybe he just missed me. We met at a restaurant on Pike Street. It was the kind of place where the waiters wear suspenders and the menus don't have prices printed on them. Daniel was already there, in a tailored suit, swirling a glass of wine like he'd invented it. "Nat!" he stood, arms wide. "Look at you, you're glowing!" I forced a smile. "Hi, Dan." We ordered. He told story after story about business partners in California, about an app he was building, about meetings in high-rise hotels. He spoke quickly, filling the air with shiny words. I nodded, picked at my pasta, and waited. Finally, he leaned forward, lowering his voice like we were in on some secret. "You still have Mom's wedding gold, right?" My fork froze mid-air. "Yes." He smiled. "Good, because it belongs to both of us." I set the fork down slowly. "That's not true. She gave it to me." "She gave it to the family," he corrected, his tone silky. "You're holding it for us, for me. You know she never wanted it sitting in some dusty box." My pulse quickened. She told me to keep it. Her words. I was there. Daniel's smile didn't falter, but his eyes hardened. "Nat, be reasonable. You're not even married. You don't wear it. What's the point? Let me take it. I'll invest the value, multiply it, make something big. That's what Mom would have wanted." I shook my head. "No." His jaw tightened. "You're being selfish." Something hot rose in my chest. Selfish? The man who borrowed thousands from Dad and never repaid it? The man who disappeared during Mom's chemo and showed up only for the will reading? I forced my voice steady. Daniel, I'm not selling it. I'm not giving it to you. Drop it. The rest of dinner was silence. He paid the bill with a dramatic flourish, muttering about family obligations. When we parted outside, the air smelled of rain on asphalt. Daniel kissed my cheek and whispered, "You'll regret this." I didn't see him again for weeks, until the envelope arrived. It was thick, heavy, the kind of envelope that carries bad news. I opened it at my kitchen table, the late afternoon light slanting across the paper. King County Civil Court summons. Plaintiff, Daniel Brooks. Defendant, Natalie Brooks. The claim, unlawful withholding of family inheritance. My hands shook so badly the pages crinkled. I read the words again. My brother wasn't just asking. He was suing me. The jewelry Mom had pressed into my palm on her deathbed, the bracelets that still smelled like rosewater, the rings warm from her skin, he was calling them family property. I sat there, staring at the paper, the sound of traffic outside fading into a dull roar in my ears. And in that moment, I realized something that cut deeper than the lawsuit itself. Daniel didn't just want the gold. He wanted to erase my mother's last words. The envelope sat on my kitchen table all night. I couldn't bring myself to file it away or even throw it aside. Every time I passed by, the bold black letters at the top seemed to glare at me. Civil Court Summons. By morning, the pages were already wrinkled from where my fingers had gripped them too tightly. I called in sick to work. My voice sounded foreign on the phone, tight, brittle, but my manager didn't ask questions. I spent the day rereading the summons. Daniel's lawyer had worded it carefully. The defendant, Natalie Brooks, is unlawfully withholding family assets of cultural and financial value, originally intended for both siblings. The plaintiff requests immediate transfer of said assets or equivalent financial restitution. In plain English, he wanted the gold. But there was one line that made my blood run cold. Evidence of intent will be presented to the court. Intent. What kind of evidence could he possibly have? Mom's words to me in the hospital had never been written down. She hadn't left a will mentioning the jewelry. It had just been her voice, her last voice, telling me, keep them. Without that, how could I prove anything? That night, I called the only person I trusted with this. Claire Donovan, my closest friend since college. Claire had a sharp mind and a sharper sense of justice. She worked as a paralegal for a small law firm downtown. When I told her about the summons, she went silent for a long moment. Then, "Natalie, this isn't just family drama anymore. This is litigation. You need a lawyer." "You can't afford not to," she cut in. "If Daniel's lawyer has cooked up some kind of paperwork, you need to be ready. You need receipts, documents, proof that those pieces were yours alone." "But there isn't anything," I whispered. "Mom never wrote it down." "Then we find other ways," Claire said firmly. "Text messages, witnesses, even bank records, anything that shows she gave them to you and Nat. Don't underestimate him. If he's willing to sue his own sister, he's willing to lie." The next day, I forced myself to step into the law office listed on the summons, Talbot and Myers. Their lobby gleamed with chrome furniture and walls lined with framed law degrees. Everything smelled faintly of leather and expensive coffee. A receptionist with a perfect smile handed me a packet of documents. "These are the filings, Ms. Brooks." I sat on a bench by the window and leafed through the pages. My stomach twisted as I read Daniel's sworn statement. My mother expressed her wish that the wedding jewelry be shared equally between her children. Natalie Brooks has refused this, hoarding the items for herself. Attached was a photocopy of an old family photo, Mom wearing her bangles, Daniel as a child beside her. Underneath, a handwritten note in unfamiliar ink, "For both children." The handwriting looked eerily like Mom's, but not quite. The letters slanted differently. Too neat, too careful. My gut told me what my heart didn't want to admit. It was forged. I left the building with my fists clenched so hard my nails dug crescents into my palms. That evening, back in my apartment, I pulled the oak jewelry box onto the table. I opened each velvet pouch one by one, laying out the bangles, the rings, the chains. They glinted under the kitchen light, innocent and silent. On a folded piece of tissue paper, I noticed something I had forgotten. A note in Mom's handwriting, tucked beneath the bracelets. Just 3 words, written shaky but clear. For Natalie only. I pressed the paper to my chest, tears blurring my vision. Proof. Maybe not legal proof yet, but it was something. Claire came over later, and I showed her the note. Her eyes widened. "This could be everything," she said, "but we'll need more. Judges don't like single scraps of paper. We'll need corroboration." She started scribbling a list. Check if Mom ever mentioned the jewelry in emails or letters. Talk to Aunt Meredith, she was at the hospital. Pull bank records. Did anyone insure the jewelry in your name? Get a handwriting analyst if necessary. I stared at her neat handwriting, feeling equal parts terrified and grateful. The fight had begun, and somewhere in the middle of my fear, a new thought crystallized. If Daniel was forging notes, if he was rewriting history to fit his greed, then this wasn't just about gold anymore. This was about protecting Mom's truth, and I wasn't going to let him erase it. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Daniel's forged note for both children. The audacity of it made my stomach twist. It wasn't just greed. It was theft of memory, of the last truth my mother had left me. By sunrise, I knew one thing. Emotions wouldn't win this battle. Courts ran on evidence. If Daniel wanted to play that game, I'd play it better. The first place I started was the hospital. I remembered the last week of Mom's life vividly, the pale green curtains, the faint beeping of machines, the rosewater lotion I rubbed into her hands when she couldn't do it herself. Aunt Meredith had been there too. I called her that morning. "Auntie," I began, voice trembling. "Do you remember Mom's last days at Swedish Medical? Do you remember her saying anything about her jewelry?" On the other end, Meredith sighed softly. "Oh, sweetheart, I do. She said the gold was yours. She told me herself. She said Natalie will keep it safe. Daniel has enough." My chest tightened. "Would you be willing to say that in court?" A pause. Then, "Yes. She was my sister. I won't let anyone twist her words." Tears pricked my eyes. For the first time since the summons, I felt a flicker of strength. Next, I dug through old emails. Mom wasn't great with technology, but she'd learned to send short notes after I moved to Seattle. I scrolled back through years of messages, my eyes blurring from the screen light, until I found one dated 6 months before her diagnosis. Subject, safekeeping. Her words, "Nat, someday all my wedding gold will be yours. Keep it close. Don't let anyone pressure you. It's for you and only you." I printed the email, my hands trembling. Proof. Solid proof. Claire was relentless. She insisted we check every angle. At her suggestion, I visited Mom's old insurance office. The clerk was hesitant at first, but after I explained, she pulled up a dusty file. "Here," she said, sliding the papers across the counter. "Margaret Brooks listed a jewelry set, insured under the name of Natalie Brooks as beneficiary. Effective date 3 years ago." I stared at the paper. My name, typed clearly beside the policy. Another piece of the puzzle clicking into place. But perhaps the most damning evidence came unexpectedly. At the post office, I asked whether Daniel had ever claimed residency at my apartment's address. The clerk checked. "No record until last month," she said. But interestingly, someone tried to forward mail under the name Margaret Brooks to his condo 2 years ago. It was blocked due to missing authorization. "Do you know what mail?" I asked. She shook her head. "Just says personal effects." My blood chilled. Could it have been the jewelry? Had Daniel tried to reroute it even before Mom passed? Claire frowned when I told her. This shows a pattern. He's been maneuvering for years. Piece by piece, my kitchen table became a battlefield. The oak jewelry box and Mom's handwritten note, for Natalie only. The email printout, all my wedding gold will be yours. The insurance documents naming me as beneficiary. Aunt Meredith's promise to testify. The postal records hinting at Daniel's earlier scheme. Claire leaned over the table one evening, tapping her pen against the growing pile. This is strong, Nat, very strong, but you need to prepare yourself. Daniel will try to spin it. He'll say Mom was confused, that you manipulated her. He'll cry about family. He'll try to make you look cold. I'm not cold, I said quietly. I'm protecting her last wish. Claire gave me a steady look. Then hold on to that, because in court it won't just be your evidence on trial, it'll be you. That night, I sat alone with the jewelry spread across the table. Each piece glimmered in the lamplight, beautiful and heavy with meaning. I thought of Mom wearing those bangles as she stirred soup on winter evenings, the chains catching the light as she leaned over to kiss my forehead goodnight. Daniel saw gold. I saw her. And I promised myself out loud to the empty room that I would not let him take her away from me twice. The hunt for evidence wasn't over, but I had enough to fight. And for the first time since the summons arrived, I didn't feel like prey. I felt like someone ready to stand her ground. The courthouse in downtown Seattle looked colder than I expected, all glass and gray stone, as if the building itself wanted to remind you that feelings didn't matter here, only facts. I arrived early, clutching a binder Claire had helped me organize. Inside were the pieces of my life: Mom's note, the insurance policy, the email, witness statements, and a photo of the jewelry itself. I wore a plain navy dress and flats, nothing flashy, nothing that could be twisted against me. When I stepped into the hallway outside courtroom 2C, Daniel was already there. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine ad, slicked back hair, a tailored charcoal suit, a briefcase in his hand. His lawyer, Talbot, stood beside him, flipping through files with the casual confidence of a man who thought the case was already won. Daniel's eyes met mine. He smirked. "Ready to do the right thing, Nat? Hand it over before this gets ugly?" I didn't answer. I just held my binder a little tighter. When the bailiff called our case, my legs felt heavy as lead. Inside, the courtroom smelled faintly of polish and old paper. The judge, a woman with sharp eyes and an even sharper tone, adjusted her glasses as she read the docket. "Brooks versus Brooks," she said. "Plaintiff seeks possession of jewelry set, claiming shared inheritance. Defendant contests on grounds of sole ownership and undue misrepresentation." Talbot stood first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed. "Your Honor, this case is simple. My client, Daniel Brooks, seeks to reclaim family property wrongfully withheld by his sister. Their late mother always intended the jewelry to be shared. We will provide testimony and written evidence to prove intent." Then Daniel took the stand. He spoke with practiced sorrow, his voice cracking in all the right places. "My sister and I were always close," he began. "But after our mother passed, she grew distant. Mom wanted us both to have her wedding gold. She told me herself. Yet Natalie refuses to acknowledge that, keeping everything for herself. This isn't about greed. It's about honoring Mom's wishes." He dabbed at his eyes with a tissue. Behind me, I heard someone sniffle. For a moment, I wanted to scream, but Claire leaned close and whispered, "Don't react. Let the evidence speak." When it was my turn, my hands trembled as I placed the oak jewelry box on the evidence table. Inside, wrapped in tissue, lay Mom's note, "For Natalie only." I lifted my chin and spoke clearly. "Your Honor, my mother did not tell both of us. She told me directly to keep her jewelry, and she put it in writing. I handed over the note. The judge studied it carefully, then glanced at Daniel. "Mr. Brooks, do you dispute that this is your mother's handwriting?" Daniel hesitated. "It looks like it, but she was very sick. She could have been confused." Claire stood. "Then let's add further context." She handed the judge the email printout. The subject line glared across the courtroom. "Safekeeping." Mom's words were short, but undeniable. "All my wedding gold will be yours." Daniel shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Next came the insurance policy, naming me as the sole beneficiary for the jewelry. Then Aunt Meredith was called as a witness. She stepped forward, voice firm despite her age. "I was there in the hospital. Margaret, my sister, said clearly that the gold was for Natalie. She said Daniel had been given enough already. I will swear that under oath." I glanced at Daniel. His face flushed crimson. Talbot scrambled to recover. He held up the photo of Mom with her jewelry, pointing to the forged note attached. For both children. "Your Honor, this demonstrates intent." But Claire's voice cut through like steel. "Respectfully, that note is fraudulent. The handwriting doesn't match, and we have a certified handwriting analyst prepared to testify if necessary. Moreover, the plaintiffs failed to disclose when or how this note was supposedly obtained. That alone raises serious credibility issues." The judge's eyes narrowed at Talbot. "Noted." Finally, Claire pulled out one last piece, a statement from the post office showing Daniel had once tried to reroute Mom's personal effects. "This demonstrates a pattern," she argued. "The plaintiff has been attempting to gain access to his mother's belongings long before her death, without authorization." The courtroom went quiet. When both sides rested, the judge leaned back, steepling her fingers. "I will review all submitted evidence and issue a written decision. But I want to say this much now. Family disputes are painful, yet the court must rely on facts. And the facts here raise serious doubts about the plaintiff's claim." Daniel's jaw tightened. For the first time, he looked less like a man in control and more like a boy who'd been caught lying. As I left the courtroom, binder in hand, I didn't feel victorious. Not yet. The official verdict would come later. But I did feel something I hadn't felt in weeks. I felt that Mom's voice, quiet but unwavering, had finally been heard. The letter from the courthouse arrived 2 weeks later in a plain white envelope. No fanfare, no dramatic delivery, just slipped through the mail slot like any ordinary bill. I stared at it on the kitchen table for hours, afraid to open it. My coffee went cold. My hands shook each time I reached for the envelope, then pulled back again. Finally, I slid a butter knife under the seal and unfolded the papers inside. Decision of the court. The jewelry set in question shall remain in the sole possession of the defendant, Natalie Brooks. The plaintiff's claim of shared inheritance lacks merit. Furthermore, the court finds evidence of misrepresentation in the plaintiff's filings. This matter is hereby referred to the district attorney's office for further review. I read the words 3 times. The letters swimming through tears, I didn't realize I was crying. I had won. Not just the jewelry, not just the case. I had won back my mother's truth. Claire came over that evening, holding 2 takeout boxes and a bottle of cheap champagne. She popped the cork in my tiny kitchen, the fizz spraying against the ceiling light. "Here's to justice," she grinned, pouring us both glasses. I lifted mine, but my voice caught. It feels heavy, like I should be celebrating, but all I can think is. It was my own brother. He tried to erase her words. Claire touched my hand gently. Winning doesn't erase the hurt, but it does protect what matters. We clinked glasses, the sound soft but resolute. The next day, my phone buzzed. Daniel. For a long moment, I just stared at the screen. Against my better judgment, I answered. His voice was sharp, brittle. "Well, you got what you wanted." I took a slow breath. What I wanted was to honor Mom's wishes. What I wanted was for you to stop lying. Silence crackled on the line. Then he said, almost spitting the words, "You'll regret this, Nat. Family doesn't forget." I hung up. My hands were trembling, but my heart felt strangely calm. Family should mean love, protection, truth. If it meant manipulation and theft, then I wasn't the one who had broken it. 2 days later, I ran into him outside a grocery store. He was loading bags into the trunk of a rental car, his face drawn and pale. For a second, I almost saw the brother I grew up with, the boy who once let me ride on his shoulders at the county fair. But then, his eyes met mine, cold and hard. "You could have shared," he muttered. I held his gaze. "You could have honored her." His jaw clenched. He slammed the trunk shut and drove away. Watching his taillights vanish down the street, I felt something break loose inside me. Not grief, not anger, but release. That evening, I placed the oak jewelry box back on my dresser. I opened it slowly, running my fingers over the bangles, the chains, the rings. They gleamed in the warm light, not as currency, but as memory. I whispered aloud, as if Mom were sitting on the bed beside me, "I kept them, Mom. I kept your word." For the first time in months, I slept deeply without waking in fear. In the days that followed, neighbors and friends came by with congratulations, with pies and flowers, with stories of their own family battles. I realized then that this wasn't just my fight. It was something many people carried silently, the pain of family turning against you, the courage it took to defend yourself. I kept all the court papers neatly in a binder, not because I wanted to relive it, but because someday someone else might need them. Proof that you don't have to hand over what is rightfully yours, even when the ones demanding it share your blood. On a quiet Sunday evening, I sat on my fire escape, the jewelry box beside me. The city hummed below, neon signs flickering, sirens in the distance, the steady beat of a place that never really sleeps. For once, I wasn't thinking about lawsuits or betrayals. I was just breathing. And I realized something as the night air cooled against my skin. Winning wasn't about gold at all. It was about refusing to let someone else rewrite my story or my mother's. And that was something no court, no brother, no forged note could ever take from me again. Winning the case didn't feel like fireworks. There was no cheering crowd outside the courthouse, no parade through the streets. It felt like me in my tiny apartment kitchen, rinsing out a coffee mug the next morning the same way I had the morning before. But something in the air was lighter, as though the walls themselves had finally exhaled. Still, victory carried its own kind of ache. Because while the jewelry was safe, my family wasn't. My father sent a short text 3 days after the verdict. "Take care of yourself. No, congratulations. No, we're proud of you." Just 5 words, clipped and neutral. I couldn't tell if it was a blessing or a farewell. My brother stopped calling altogether. The silence between us stretched wide, like a canyon too deep to cross. And though part of me longed for some sign of remorse, I knew better than to wait. Even my aunt, loyal as she was in court, grew quieter after. Helping me had cost her. I could hear it in the tremor of her voice. Family politics were sharp, and she had chosen her side, mine. It was a gift I would never forget. The weeks blurred into a rhythm of ordinary life, commuting to work, paying bills, cooking small dinners for one. But the ordinary felt different now, because for months I had woken up with a knot in my stomach, dreading summons, phone calls, lawyer meetings, and suddenly, it was gone. The oak jewelry box stayed on my dresser, no longer a source of fear, but of quiet strength. Sometimes, at night, I'd open it and trace my finger over the bangles, hearing Mom's voice in the back of my mind, "Keep them, Nat, they're yours." And now I could finally whisper back, I did. One cold afternoon in December, I spotted Daniel again. He was outside a hardware store, his once sleek suit replaced by a rumpled jacket. his shoulders hunched as if carrying an invisible weight. He saw me. For a long moment, we just stared. Then he walked closer. "I heard the DA drop the review," he muttered. "No charges. Guess you got lucky." I shook my head. It wasn't luck. It was truth. His jaw tightened. "Mom would have wanted us to share. She wanted me to keep them," I said softly. "And you know it." His eyes flickered just for a second, with something like shame. Then he turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd. Watching him go, I felt a pang, not of anger, but of grief. Grief for the brother I had once trusted, for the family we might have been. But grief didn't mean weakness. It meant I still cared. And caring didn't erase the boundary I had drawn. By spring, I began to rebuild. Not my apartment that was still the same 4 walls with peeling paint, but my circle. Neighbors invited me for coffee. Claire dragged me out to weekend markets. Even strangers from the courthouse reached out, sharing their own stories of family betrayal and inheritance battles. I learned I wasn't alone. So many had stood in my shoes, defending what was rightfully theirs against the very people who should have protected them. One Saturday, I hosted a small gathering. Just a handful of friends crammed into my living room, laughter bouncing off the walls. Someone strummed a guitar, someone else passed around homemade pie. For the first time, I looked around and thought, this is family too. Not the kind bound by blood, but by choice, by showing up, by telling the truth, even when it's hard. I still keep the binder of court documents in my closet, not as a trophy, not to reopen wounds, but as a reminder that standing your ground is never easy. A reminder that even when those closest to you turn away, you can still protect what matters. And a reminder that healing doesn't mean pretending nothing happened, it means finding peace in what remains. One evening, as the city lights flickered on and the hum of traffic softened into the night, I sat on my fire escape with a cup of tea. The jewelry box rested on my lap, its oak surface warm under my hands. I thought about Mom, about the way she used to hum while cooking, the way her bracelets jingled when she tucked me into bed. I closed my eyes and breathed in the memory. The storm had passed. The scars would remain, yes, but so would the strength. I had lost a brother in the process, but I had kept something more precious, my mother's truth, and myself, and no one could ever take that away. This wasn't just a courtroom battle over gold. It was about truth, about memory, about refusing to let someone else rewrite a mother's last words. Natalie didn't just protect a box of jewelry, she protected her dignity, her voice, and her mother's love. And maybe that's the real inheritance. The strength to stand firm, even when family turns against you. Have you ever had to defend something that mattered not for its price, but for its meaning? Share your story in the comments below. Your voice matters, and it deserves to be heard. If this story touched you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Because sometimes the quietest truths are the ones that need to be told the loudest.